Well, good day again, everybody, and welcome back to Notes from the Pastor Cave. A little bit of spring weather outside, and I'm getting that little bit of spring glop in my throat. So please forgive me if I give a little choke or a cough along the way. We want to remind you that it's really important that you subscribe to Notes from the Pastor Cave. Kind of the way YouTube works and most social media platforms work is kind of the more you have, the more you get. Okay, so he who has will be given more, to put it in biblical terms. So the more people that subscribe, the more our service kind of gets out there and allows more people to see these videos, which allows more people to subscribe. So if you haven't subscribed yet, you're just kind of running across this for the first or second time, and you're not sure yet, please go ahead and do that, and that will really help us along the way. It will help us just to reach a lot more people with these teaching videos. And so we're really proud of what we've produced so far with the video notes. This is, from the very beginning, we've said this is a non-bells and whistles thing. This is just like me sitting in your living room holding a Bible study with, the 3 or 4 couples, okay? Think of it in terms of that. And we're just, looking through scriptures where I've taken notes in the past just to kind of to give myself a little highlight to say, okay, when I read this is what God wanted me to understand here. So anyways, we are in Exodus chapter 11, and this is God kind of starts bringing in chapter 11 the idea of this final plague, and it's going to be an absolutely terrible thing that God is going to go through, and He's going to the firstborn of everything, cattle, chickens, whatever. The firstborn of everything is going to experience a night of death. And there's going to be, great weeping and mourning and grieving in Egypt, really because of the stubbornness of one man, and that's Pharaoh, who has set himself up against God. He's a person in authority who has set himself up against God, and this is what it's come down to. This is kind of the final showdown. And in verse 7, and what we're going to find out in chapter 12 is that there's a way to get out of this night of death. This terrible tragedy, this terrible mourning, that God makes a way of escape, and that's probably a subject for another whole video of how God always makes a way of escape. But but what happens in chapter 11 is that God begins to tell them that there's going to be a distinction. So God kind of describes that this terrible thing is going to happen. And then he says in verse 7, he says that you may know that the Lord makes a distinction between Egypt and Israel. That you may know that the Lord makes a distinction between Egypt and Israel. So he says, look, this death event is going to come. And it's going to be over everybody living in the land of Egypt, which includes the Israelites. Okay? But then God is beginning to introduce the idea that He's going to make a way of escape that they can understand, meaning Egyptians and meaning Israelites. That they can understand that God makes a distinction between Egypt and Israel, and in a typological sense, between those who are followers of God and those who are not. Okay, and it's very easy, kind of in our world, and most of the 9 times out of 10, what I'm preaching to people is, hey, we're all stuck here on planet Earth, and as I say all the time, we live on a broken planet, and so broken things happen on a broken planet. Loved ones, die of cancer. There are earthquakes in Haiti where thousands and thousands of people die. There are shootings that take place from people who have become twisted in some way and are expressing evil in some way. And so you have all of these things that take place, and we're all kind of in the soup together, because we're all living. As soon as a person gives their hearts to Jesus, Jesus doesn't say, "Okay, time to go," and take them away. No, we live here. We live here amongst each other. And so, we have this concept from, that we get from the scriptures, that the rain falls on the just and the unjust, right? If a Christ follower and a non-Christ follower are walking down the street together and it's raining, all the rain doesn't just fall on the non-Christ follower; it falls on all of us. And we have like Psalm 73, where the psalmist is a righteous man, and he's walking down the streets. He's on his way to his job at the temple, and he's seeing how the wicked prosper. People who just don't care anything about God at all. And they've got the a new camel with beautiful radial tires on it, and all of these things, and they have all these possessions, and he's just kind of struggling along. And he's doing what anybody would do, and he's saying, "Why, God? Why?" And the fact of the matter is that we're all together at this time, and so we tend to kind of I tend to kind of preach that way, that we're all in this, that we're kind of all in this together. And so, for instance, when we have a pandemic, that sweeps across the planet, there are followers of Jesus who die. They just do. Now, we don't know the percentages. We don't know how many that God protects when maybe he might not have protected them. But the very fact of the matter is, there are followers of Jesus who have died from the pandemic, just as there are non-followers of Jesus who have died from the pandemic. We're all in the soup together. Okay. And so it becomes important for me to tell you today, from Exodus chapter 11, that the Lord makes a distinction between Egypt and Israel. Okay, it might not look that way, it might not seem that way, but God makes a distinction between Egypt and Israel. And that distinction actually is going to be conditional. It's a conditional distinction, in that the Israelites are obedient to God. If they are obedient to God and they do what God asks them to do, they will be protected in this circumstance. Okay, doesn't mean that doesn't mean always, but in this circumstance, they will be protected. Okay, so the Lord makes a distinction between each. Maybe you're out there today and you're just facing life, and life is just kind of kicking the snot out of you right now, and you are a follower of Christ, and you're saying, why does all this happen to me? If there's supposed to be like special privileges that go along with being a Christ follower, I'm not feeling it right now, because I just feel like I'm subject to everything else that's going around me. I want to let you know that God makes a distinction between Egypt and Israel. He knows who you are, and he knows that you've surrendered your life to him. And he is protecting you in ways that maybe you can't see. You probably can't. You probably can't see it. I know that God has protected me in all kinds of ways in my life, looking back, in ways I just did not see at the time. And yet God was looking after me. God was watching after me. And I guarantee that He's watching after you too, because the eyes of the Lord roam back and forth across the earth. And there's nothing that gets missed by God. So I want you to know today, if you're in that rough patch, if you're in that really difficult place, that God makes a distinction between Egypt and Israel. He really, really does. And we'll find out in the days ahead that it becomes vitally important that God makes that distinction. Okay? Have a great day. God bless you. Vita brevis gloria aeterna. Life is short. Glory is eternal.